In the near future, scientists invent a device called a timer, which is placed on people's wrists and counts the time between them and their soulmate. Both members of a couple must have the device to activate it, and it will start ringing when they finally meet. The device immediately becomes a huge success, and soon most of the society owns one, but many people still refuse to get it because they don't want the choice to be made for them. In Los Angeles, dentist Una has one timer that hasn't started yet, which means his soulmate hasn't. After only a few months of dating her last boyfriend, she convinces him to have another one and takes him to the clinic. Everyone knows Una because she takes all her boyfriends to make sure they are the one for her before going ahead with the relationship. The last man also receives the timer and it immediately activates, showing that he has 2 years to meet his soulmate. Una looks at her timer, but it is still off and breaks up with the man, who is very excited to meet this right after school. Meanwhile, Una's half-sister Steph continues to have a series of one-night stands with random men whose timer is about to run out because her timer says she'll meet her soulmate in 15 years. He often tells Una that she too should enjoy life until she meets her soulmate, but Una refuses to stay with someone without guarantees. One day, Una is in a grocery store when the cashier Mikey tries to flirt with her. Una is flattered, but sees that her timer already has a date, which means she is not her soulmate. Mikey also notices his timer and points out that they can still meet because they have a long wait ahead of them, but Una rejects him. At night, the sisters go to their parents' house. His younger brother Jesse. Finally, he is old enough to have his own timer and a matchmaker is invited to perform the procedure at home. As soon as Jesse receives the implant, he breaks down and reveals that he will meet his soulmate in 3 days. The whole family is excited and congratulates her, but Una can't help but say that it's unfair. When she realizes it's ruining her mood, she also congratulates Jesse and leaves without dinner. Tired and frustrated by her situation, Una returns to the shop and then some. Reluctantly, he asks Mikey to spend the night together. Mike readily agrees and after telling his colleague to take his place, leaves with Una in his car. It's a difficult journey because they don't know each other and Una starts to question her idea when they get to Mikey's house because the 4 roommates and the mess in the room make her realize how young she is. She considers leaving, but Mikey insists everything is fine before they kiss. It is one nice moment, but when she sees that there are only 4 months left on her timer, Una feels guilty and apologizes to Mikey before leaving. The next day, Una is surprised to discover that her latest patient is Mikey, which he found because he is the only dentist with that last name. He really wants to have a good time with her, so he explains that he is a musician in a band and not just a cashier. Mikey also says that the timer tells you the end of the game, but that life is full of diversions. But Una is still not interested and thinks that being meaningful to her would be like cheating on your future soulmate. In the evening, Una goes on a blind date, but the guy is incredibly bored and only talks when answering her questions. Una decides to cut the date and goes to the club where Steph works as a bartender. To his surprise, Mikey's band is playing there, and watching him come out awakens something in Una. They end up making eye contact and create so much tension that once the concert is over, Una goes to Mikey to finally do the dirty work. As they're about to start, they hear Mikey's roommates come in and make a lot of noise. So Mikey comes out and asks them to be quiet, explaining how great Una is and that this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Una hears all this and is very pleased. Mike then puts on some music to drown out her noises and gets down to business with her. The next day, Steph is at her job as a receptionist when a man named Dan arrives. She finds him very handsome and starts flirting with him, but quickly brushes it off when she notices he doesn't have a timer. Later at home, Steph knows that Una finally has a relationship and congratulates her, but also advises her not to see Mikey anymore, because this did not end well. Sometime later, Una's parents are very excited because today is the day Jesse's timer hits 0, which means he must meet his soulmate. However, he spends the whole day at normal school without having the slightest reaction. When Jesse returns home, the maid Luz introduces him to her husband and daughter Soledad, whose timer suddenly hits 0. The same goes for Jesse's, which means they are soulmates. While the teenagers look at each other awkwardly, Jesse's mother is very excited and wants to start planning all kinds of things. But Luz is uncomfortable and immediately leaves with her family. In the evening, Una is leaving her office when she is surprised from behind and ends up hitting the attacker. It turns out to be Mikey, who insists on spending more time with her, and she agrees to take him to her place. After another great night together, Una can't deny how much she loves Mikey, and they start spending a lot of time together outside of the bedroom. Una also befriends Mikey's roommates, finding them more fun than she expected. One day, Un tells Mikey that his father is a music producer, but he hasn't seen him since the divorce. Mikey realizes that she is the daughter of a very important person in the industry and says that it makes her cheers even more amazing. Meanwhile, Steph's boss yells at her for not answering the phone, but luckily Danny shows up and makes up a cover story. After the boss leaves, Dan takes an obvious interest in Steph, who doesn't like him back. However, he thinks he might be good for Una, so he tells her to visit him at the bar in the evening. Later, Steph also invites Una over, revealing that she hasn't been around much lately. Una feels bad, but she still doesn't tell him about Mikey because she knows Steph will judge her for it. That night, Una chooses to spend time with Mikey, so Dan ends up talking to Steph. They hit it off quickly and spend most of the night together, sharing more about their lives. Dan explains that his wife died 3 years ago and he thinks she was the one, so he has no interest in taking the timer. By the end of the evening, Steph realizes that she is in love with the boy. When Steph gets home, she's still mad at Una for getting up. Then, he sees Mikey in Una's room and realizes that they have been in secret. An argument immediately begins about Mikey's timer and the fact that he is a soulmate will soon appear for him. So Mikey interrupts them and discovers that his timer is fake. It's just a sticker he removes, explaining that he didn't want to be mocked for a trend, and admits that he doesn't believe the timers actually work. Una is shocked and hurt by the lie, so she kicks Mikey out. The days start to pass and Una can't stop thinking about Mikey. In fact, it is understood that because they met naturally, Una was able to be herself and enjoy her dates without worrying about legitimacy or the future. Eventually, she decides to reconnect with him and discuss things about starting to date again. When Thanksgiving time comes, Una decides to bring Mikey as her date. Luz and her family are also there with some dishes from their country, hoping to bring the two families together. Teenagers are always awkward, but Mikey can speak Spanish. Then he acts as a translator between the two groups. Una's parents have many questions for Mikey, but Una answers them instead, not letting him speak because she fears that anything she says will be used to judge her. After dinner, Una's mother tells her that she likes Mikey, but worries about a possible heartbreak when Una's soulmate finally shows up. Meanwhile, Dan and Steph start dating in secret and begin a very casual relationship. Sometime later, Mikey tells Una that he loves her, causing her to panic and run away. In need of some serious counseling, Una decides to visit her biological father Rick, and Steph also goes there to support her. At first, the situation is very awkward, so Una diffuses the tension by sharing a CD of Mikey's music for him to review. She then asks why he never had a timer, but to her surprise, Rick reveals that he does. This means that his mother lied when she claimed that they divorced because Rick did not want a timer. Rick still has time before he meets his soulmate, but he prefers to enjoy life and real emotions. When the sisters are about to leave, they discover that Rick's much younger girlfriend had the timer removed because she loves Rick and her feelings are more real than what the timer says. Inspired by this, the sisters rush to the clinic to have their timers removed so they can live their days more spontaneously. Employees warn that if the device is removed once, they can't find it again. So this is your last chance to find the one. Steph doesn't care and immediately removes hers, feeling relieved. However, when it's Una's turn, she hesitates, at which point her timer starts ticking to show that her soulmate has finally gotten hers. With only 5 hours left until the date, Una decides to keep her timer, pretending it's just curiosity, but Steph gets angry with her and feels betrayed. Later, the sisters go to their parents' house to celebrate their joint birthday. While her parents are talking, Jesse approaches Soledad and tells her that he learned some Spanish for her. Without pressure from their families, teenagers are finally able to bond on their own terms. Mikey was also invited and works as a translator between Luz and Una's mother, who decides to keep their relationship as boss and employee and let the teenagers work privately. Meanwhile, Steph spends time with Dan, who was also invited. Just then, Una bumps into him and his timers go off, revealing that they are soulmates. Steph immediately gets angry and rushes into the kitchen as Mikey angrily leaves the party. Dan runs after Steph and tries to comfort her, but Una interrupts. Another argument arises as Steph feels like she missed out on the best thing that ever happened to her, accusing Una of always taking things. However, Una says that Steph is her best friend and nothing in her life is worth losing, not even her soulmate. So Una leaves and Dan tells Steph that he just took the timer for her. Una doesn't care. She loves Steph. The next day, Una goes to see Mikey and reveals to him that she removed the timer because she wants to be with him. Mikey is touched by the gesture, but declines, saying that he can see she's not in love with him and that he's just someone safe. Devastated, Una leaves and later visits Steph. After a heated conversation, the sisters finally agreed. A little later, Una goes out for a run and bumps into Dan, so they have a very awkward conversation. They may say they have things in common, but now it's too late and they're going their separate ways.